So I'd like to talk to you today about the technology behind the work we do at Medidata. My name's Ed Andersen. I work in the Tokyo office, but I sort of travel about and do talks like this. I'm on Twitter and have a blog if that's your sort of thing. .NET at Medidata is very important. In 2012, 85% plus of our revenue came from .NET-based products. It's pretty important to the work we do, and it's a pretty good place to work if you are a .NET developer. Everybody gets Msdn subscriptions, including the Azure credits if you're interested in Azure cloud stuff. Resharper, if you're a Resharper user, no questions asked, you get a license. Pluralsight subscriptions, so if you want to watch the best .NET developers in the world do training courses online, you can do that. And one of the best things we do is innovation time. So similar to Google's 20% time, for 2 weeks, twice a year, you get 2 weeks of your own to do anything you like, and you can present the results at the end, and hopefully your work might end up in a product or a new product, or you never know. So let's crack on. Today we're going to build a web app called MediTwit. It's a Twitter clone, essentially. And it's just going to have a status update thing on the left. And we're going to show our status updates here. We're going to have some Google single sign-on. And within an hour, hopefully, from file new projects, we're going to put all this together and deploy it to the cloud in less than an hour, hopefully before the pizzas turn up. This is going to be a bit of a challenge. There will be copying and pasting, though, so don't hold it against me. So without further ado, let's crack on. I'll be sitting down for this, but if you have any questions, feel free to shout. Okay, so we have here Visual Studio, which we will open. Sometimes this thing is a little bit slow, but depends on your hard disk space, I guess. So if we do a new project here, we're going to do a project called MediTwit, self-explanatory. Then we get this pop-up menu. This is called the one ASP.NET window. You can sort of combine different types of .NET projects inside one web project. You have the option to add unit tests. We're not going to actually do unit tests for this today, but the code we write should be testable, hopefully, fingers crossed. So we hit OK, and it will create our project. This will give us a nice template full of lots of useful stuff once it's finished. Takes a bit of time. Come on. Right, so we have a project here. First thing we want to do is upgrade all of the package dependencies, which we can see here. Go to updates. Come on. Right, update all. This will take a little bit of time. So in the meantime, we're going to set up our database that we're going to use for our app. We'll call this MediTwit, like that. That's created a database here with nothing in it. Let's go back. Okay, I accept. Lovely. Right, carry on. We should see on the right here it's doing some stuff to our references, blah, blah, blah. Normally with live coding you skip this step, but by having a pre-set up project, but we're doing this for reals. Come on. Takes a bit of time. Right, we're off. And for some reason we need to restart Visual Studio. That's due to the entity framework integration. Okay, so we should be good to go. First thing we need to do is update our connection string to point to the database we've just created. So in web config here, we have this thing. Let's say goodbye. Bye, 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 bye. And we will paste that one in there. If we start our app, we should hopefully see something pretty useful. First compile's always a bit slow. Right, so we've got a nice template here, Bootstrap 3, lovely jubbly. We want to use Google to sign in here, so if we stop our app and head to Startup Auth, this template supports Microsoft, Twitter, Facebook authentication. We just want the Google one because everybody at Medidata uses Google accounts. So let's start the app again. Should be able to just refresh this page. Fingers crossed. Okay, and we have our Google auth, so we click Google. and we will be redirected to a page to confirm our Google details. So you can change your username or whatever, hit register, and we're already signed in. If we check our database, check under tables, let's do a refresh. No. Oh yeah. Where's my tables gone? Interesting. Ooh, interesting. Okay, let's stop that again. The demo gods are not on my side today. Should be it. Let's go and play. Oh, that's because I didn't refresh the page. Right, okay, very good. Log off, log in, Google. Interesting. How did it even log in? Let's check our connection string. That's normally it. Oh right, there is no connection string. It's commented out. That would be why. Very good, right. Let's try that again. If you've got a commented out connection string, it just creates a local file database, which is obviously what it was using instead of our proper database. Okay, let's try that again. Log off, log in, Google. Come on. Should ask us to register again because it's not in this DB. Right, and now if we refresh this. Okay, we're in business. It's created some tables for us, including our user. This is great, but for our Twitter clone, we actually need the full name and the email address of the user. We can get this from Google. It just requires a little bit of fiddling about with our code. So you could probably fall asleep for this next bit. We need to stick that in there. We need to do external login confirmation. Stick that in there. On the account controller, you can Google to find out how to do all this, and normally you would want to set this up before doing a demonstration to a room full of people. Hello. 218. Delete this line, and we can see here this code is getting emails and identities from Google's OAuth system. And there's a couple more updates in 273. Our application user is now updated with the email address and the full name here, which is great. And then we need to update that form that you get redirected to also include the email address and full name sections. So we can take this HTML markup, enter, email address, there you go, paste that in there, full name. So this is an MVC5 application, and we are just editing the very simple HTML views. If we reset our database by firing it into orbit. New database, Medidata. Now, if we run our app, we should, fingers crossed, have, no, that's the wrong link. Fingers crossed, get full name and email address support from our Google account. Google. Come on. So that's great. So it's got my email address and it's got my full name from Google OAuth, register. And if we reload this database, check this table, we can see that we've got the email address and the full name, which is exactly what we want. So that's the hard bit done. The next thing we want to do is remove all of this ASP.NET advertising. So there's a few places we need to delete this. If we head to the home controller here, we can delete these two actions that we don't need anymore. If we head to the home views, we can also delete those corresponding views like that. In the layout, you can see that ReSharper has started telling me that things are disappearing, and it's highlighting them in red, so that's great. So you can delete those because they don't exist anymore. Let's update the branding on this page. We'll do this Meditwit, exactly what we want. Application name here, and in the footer, Meditwit, nice. And then on the home page, we want to delete all of this advertising junk and replace it with a very simple bit of Bootstrap code. So we delete that, stick Bootstrap in here. And we have 2 columns. If you're familiar with Bootstrap, it's divided into 12 columns. So there's 2 columns here, each 6 mini sub-columns wide. Fingers crossed, if we run the site again, should have it debranded. Come on, there you go, perfect. That looks a bit better than before. Okay, let's stop the site. Next step we need to do is create a database table for our twits. Here is a DB context, database context, which has been given to us by this template. This is an entity framework DB context class, which allows you to access database tables, etc. First thing we want to do is move this to another file because we don't like mixing classes in one file. We also need to create our model. Twit, there you go. And our model class is going to look a little bit like this. So we'll have an ID column, which is a GUID and a primary key. And we'll have a user, which is a foreign key and it's required. And the twit content, which is simply a string. If we run, oh no, hang on, we don't want to run the app yet. We need to actually add our table to our DB context in here. There you go. So we can access all the twits in the database using this collection here. If we do run the app now, we're going to have an error. That's because the schema of the database has changed, but the app doesn't know about it. So if we log in, the reason we have to log in every time is because it doesn't talk to the database until we actually do a connection to the database. Here we go. So the model backing the database context has changed. Consider using code first to update the database. That's exactly what we're going to do. So first we'll fire this into orbit again. Create a new DB. An entity framework has hooked into this NuGet package manager console inside Visual Studio. So we want to enable code first migrations, so we type enable migrations. And migrations are very similar to, if you've done Ruby on Rails, very similar to active record migrations. So here we've got a folder called migrations, which is great. If we create our first migration, and we'll call it initial, like that. You can see what it creates here. It's given us a class with an up migration, which versions up the database, creates this table, creates our twits table, with a primary key, a foreign key, and an index. And it's created this class purely based on our model definition here, which is awesome. And right at the bottom here, we've got the down migration if you want to version down your database schema. And it drops the foreign keys, drops the index, drops the tables. It does everything in reverse of the up. To run these migrations automatically when the application's running, there's a magic little bit of code here. Again, this is all Googleable, Stack Overflow, etc. This just says migrate the database to the latest version every time you start the app. So you don't have to run SQL server update scripts or get anybody involved. The app can update its own schema, which is pretty cool. Now if we log in, we can do Google again. Register. Okay, and if we load these tables, we can see that it's created a twits table for us, which is pretty cool, with the 3 columns. However, we're going to need an extra column here for the created at date, because we're going to sort by the time that the twit was created. So very simple to add this. We go to our model class. We want to add a new property. And it's going to look a little bit like that one. So it's a very simple date time, and we want to create a new migration for this. So we do add migration. Let's say add created at date. Okay, lovely. So it's created this second migration for us, which adds a column or drops a column. But because we're sorting on this, we're obviously going to want to create an index for this, or sorting is going to be pretty slow. So we create an index, and for the down, we drop the index, and we do the reverse, which is pretty simple. So if we run the app again, we hit do login again. At this point it should be updating our database schema. So if we do select again, we can see that we've got our created at date column, and it's automatically been added for us, which is pretty cool. Okay, so now we've done our database tables. Let's add a class that the rest of our code can use to access the Twit database. Popular word these days is services, so we're going to call this the Twit service. And here's one I made earlier. So here's a Twit service class, very simple. It takes the DB context in the constructor and it creates a Twit for the current user. It's only got one method. Creates a new Twit object, adds it to the context and saves the changes. Problem is here that it doesn't actually add it to the current user. There's no user code. So to do that we need to create another class, Identity Service, which wraps around the nasty static line of code that you need to get the current user ID. We want to use this identity service from the Twit service, but we don't want a concrete dependency on this particular implementation of identity service. So we need to extract an interface from this class, place another file, use that method, and it's created an interface for us here. Now in the Twit service, we can add to the constructor private read only, identity service, like so. And then in the method, create Twit for current user. We can update the code here to get the current user ID, query the database for that user that matches the current user ID, set it to the user and carry on as before. Now we want to access this Twit service from the home controller, but to do this again, we're going to extract an interface from it. Done. Head to the home controller, and we can do something like private read only, Twit service. Twit service. If we were using a dependency injection framework such as Unity or an inject or things like that, we would automatically have an instance of Twit service injected into this home controller when the home controller is instantiated. However, we're not using a dependency injection framework, so we're going to have to do this with a manual constructor here, and we'll do what is known as poor man's dependency injection to create the Twit service using the concrete implementations. Once you hook up a dependency injection framework to something like this, you can just delete this constructor and everything else will continue as normal. So we need to create the form here. So if you remember, we had on the left a text box with a button and the Twits on the right. To do this, let's create a view model which represents our UI. So we're going to create a view model called Home Index View Model. And in this view model, very simple, there's only one field, Twit content. We're going to be a bit better than Twitter here by supporting 141 characters instead of 140. So, you know, we'll be millionaires soon, IPO and all that. And then in the home controller, we want to pass an instance of this view model through to the view. So the nice thing about views in MVC.NET is that they can be strongly typed, which means there is a backing model for the view. So if we head to home index, we can just stick model home index view model like that. And at any point in the view, we can access the properties on the model that has been passed through to the view. There's no guessing the magic strings or anything. It's pretty good. So we save that there. Under MediTwit here, under the logo, let's put a little message in for unauthenticated users. So if you're not authenticated, it's going to say sign in to Twit, which is nice. But obviously, if you're authenticated, let's stick in a form. So this is using an HTML helper which builds the form tags for us. We have a text area for the Twit content, a validation message for the Twit content, and a Twit button, which is nice. So let's that's a lot of work. So let's see if it's actually working or not. Come on, right. So click Twit. It appears to do a post. It's posting even though it's blank, which is not what we want, because in the view model we have required as a data attribute. To enforce required things, we can add a reference to jQuery client-side validation, which will handle this for us. The bundles here is .NET MVC's asset bundling, very similar to, again, Rails' asset pipeline. You can specify CSS and JavaScript and it will bundle it all together and minify it and do lots of stuff to improve performance, which is pretty cool. So let's test out this validation, but we can probably just refresh. And hopefully Twit does, the Twit field is required. That's fantastic. And we should even have length check. Yep, so we can't submit the form if it's too long, and we can't submit the form if there's nothing in it. But if we type something, we can press Twit, and it appears to be doing a post, which is awesome. But we're not picking up that post yet. So let's add a post action to the home controller here. In there. You can see here that this is the same, but it's HTTP post on index. It takes the view model, which is automatically bound from the fields on the screen. We do one more check to see if the model state is valid. Because we've been doing client-side JavaScript checks, just in case JavaScript has been turned off, we want to check again on the server if it's actually valid or not. And then we call the Twit service here with create Twit for current user with the Twit content and redirect back to the index. So fingers crossed, if we actually do this now. Come on. Right. Do hello world, hit Twit. I should do a post through. We should be able to check the database here. There you go. Hello world has been added to the database, which is pretty cool. And we haven't written any SQL yet. Next up, we want to display these in the UI on the right here. So let's add a method to our Twit service to get all the twits. We're going to call this get all twits ordered by date, and it gets the twits ordered by descending created at and passes it back up. We need to call this from the home controller. We need to add it to our interface here by pulling the member up. Done. And in the home controller here, we want to add it to the view. So if we change this line of code here, oh, we need to add twits to actually the view model first. That would help. So on the home index view model, we also need to include the twits on the screen. And then twits here, going to await the Twit service. How doesn't that work? Oh, yes, it needs to be a synchronous action. There we go. Right. So we've added the twits to the view model, and again on the post action, just in case it's failed the validation of the form, we will add the twits to the view model as well. Now we need to actually do the markup to display this. So in our second column on the right, very simply, we stick in, for each twit in the twits of the model, we'll do a div with the class twit, and we'll do full name, creator, and twit content. And we should be able to run the app now. Fingers crossed. Come on. Just loading up. And we should see that tweet we just created. Fantastic. Look. So hello world has been added to the screen. If we stop the app, let's make this a bit prettier. We need it in a box of some sort. So here's our CSS file, but we can do something a bit better than CSS these days. Visual Studio now supports less, so if we just rename that file to a less file, it automatically doubles up. We've got the less on the left and the CSS that's being compiled from it on the right. CSS less is awesome because it supports nested classes. So you can do something like this, where inside a Twit class you've got other properties, which in raw CSS you can't do. If we save this, you can see that it creates the equivalent CSS on the right, which is awesome. Run the app again to check out our styles. Is everyone still following? Yeah? Going a bit fast? Got pizza on the way, so we need to get through this. But it's shaping up, so, oh, no, CSS hasn't loaded, let's refresh. There you go, so we've got it all in a box, but we want to make this a little bit more Web 2.0, so let's stick some rounded corners in here. Nice border radius. If we save that there, oh, it's magically appeared. This the CSS is automatically updated, and this is thanks to a feature in Visual Studio 2013 called a browser link. If we move this over here, and we move Visual Studio over here, if we click this button, all the browsers which are connected to the site automatically reload. Which is pretty cool. This even works with Internet Explorer. So we can load this here, and this little refresh button will automatically reload everything on the screen, which is nice of it. Which is pretty cool for testing out changes. So for example, we can do test here, save, press a button, and all the browsers have automatically been reloaded. It's a bit nicer if you have multiple monitors with a different browser on each one, but in the meantime, you can have a look at a mini one. There's also another cool feature here, enabled by a plugin called Web Essentials, which you can see floating around on the bottom here. If we click Inspect, you can float around your HTML in your browser, and in your IDE, it actually highlights the stuff, the markup corresponding. This is magic as far as I'm concerned. It's pretty cool. It works in every browser, and it's pretty cool. So if you're debugging your markup, you can get it highlighted straight in the IDE. So anyway, that's enough of that fun. Next up, we need to show the pictures, the gravatars of our users. So to do that, we're going to again rely on a nice little package from NuGet here. Cancel that. Online, called Gravatar Helper. Will this work first time? Come on, load. This wasn't working during the rehearsals. Come on. Typical. Come on. I wonder if our internet's still working. No, internet's still working. Come on, let's try that again. There's a message about proxies for some reason that just appeared. Don't know what that's about. Come on. Still working. So, yeah, very good. Oh. Come on, you get. Any questions so far while this is broken?
You mentioned it supports less. Does it support SAS at all?
I believe there is a plugin to Visual Studio that will do it, which will give you pretty much the same experience as the less editor. I think they chose less because Bootstrap is less based. I know the Rails guys kind of prefer Sass normally, but God dearie me. Let's try something different. Let's try doing it this way. Install package Gravatar Helper. There you go, it works. Fantastic, right. So I've installed a Gravatar Helper. And in the index here, we just want to add a Gravatar link. Stick that in there. So this is a helper class provided by that package. It just gets the Gravatar of the user. And we just want to add a little snippet of CSS in here for the image. Floats it to the left, adds a margin. And if we run the app, we should hopefully see nice photos appear, fingers crossed. Come on. There you go. Right, I've got my picture. It's nice. We can do test. Twit. Let's come up. Very nice. Cool. So we've done a very basic display of the twits. It's probably worth at this sort of stage to do a sanity check on the queries that we're making to the database. We're using the entity framework ORM, and some people have an allergic reaction to ORMs because they don't trust the queries that are made to the database. So the only way to actually figure out if it's decent or not is to properly profile it. And to profile it, we're going to, if this actually works. Okay, let's just try it down here instead. Install package glimpse. So this is a package called glimpse. No, it doesn't work. We do not support proxies with the HTTPS scheme. Come on, Medidata Network. What's wrong with you? Dearie me. Let's try the Wi-Fi. Not that it will help. No. Come on. I think I'm going to stop using NuGet. I used to like it, but not anymore. Come on. Okay, let's try something else. Oh dear, very good. This has happened once before and magically it started working again. Still package glimpse, huh? Magic. Look at that. Right. Let's try glimpse.ef6 for Entity Framework 6. Doesn't work. Okay, fine. Let's glimpse.ef6. If this works, I'm going to be blown away. Only occasionally works. C5. Come on. Any ideas, anyone?
Restart Visual Studio.
Restart Visual Studio, that's a good idea. Could help. Come on. Okay, try that again. Oh, tell me it's worked. It's worked. Genius. Extra pizza to that man. Extra pizza. Extra pizza. Right. Windows problems. Yeah, as you do. There you go. That's installed Glimpse. Now Glimpse is a really cool profiler. Let's start the app that has Glimpse installed. If we visit this secret URL, we can turn Glimpse on here. And now if we visit our app, we should have a nice profiler installed. So at the bottom here, we can see some timings of the request, which is pretty cool. See what happened on the server, what happened on the client. If we click this button, we get a nice pop-up which shows the SQL that we wanted to find out to see if our queries are any good. We can see it's done 2 SQL queries. First one here is getting the list of twits by the looks of it. And here it's another query to actually get the user information, which implies that our code is doing a separate request for every user in this list. So if we had 10 users, we'll be doing 10 requests. That's not good. So obviously we want to add a database join to bring in all the users at the same time. So in this get all twits ordered by date, we can go include twit t.user, lovely jubbly. And now if we run the app, we should hopefully see, if we refresh it, that there's been one query and it's done the database join, so that's awesome. So we've optimized our front-end queries. Now we're ready for the final step of this, which is to do real-time updates of these twits on the right. To do this, God help me, hopefully this works, we are going to use a package called SignalR. That's quick. SignalR is a real-time library written by Microsoft guys. SignalR is pretty damn cool. There's a couple of steps we need to do to get SignalR working in this. If we head down here, in Startup we need to add that line of code. In our front end we need references to the JavaScript in the scripts here, so we'll stick that JavaScript reference in there. We also need to create a hub class. So if we call this in the hubs folder, we'll call it twit hub. This hub is what all the connected clients will connect to. And we have one I made earlier. So it has a hub name, twit hub, and this is a SignalR hub. To talk to SignalR from our client, we need to do this in JavaScript. So we're going to add a JavaScript for the home view. Call this index.js. To get that to load, we need to add a reference to it. Here. And we can update our JavaScript with a bit of jQuery magic. So this jQuery here is connecting to the twit hub, and this matches this string here. And we defined a new method called newTwit, which simply takes a string and writes it to the console of the browser. So we can do this to confirm that the server is actually notifying the clients. To actually notify the clients, we need to create another service called the hub notification service. The hub notification service will have one method which wraps a nasty bit of static code here and isolates the static nastiness from everything else. So to use this elsewhere, we obviously want to extract an interface, and because it doesn't actually have to work against a hub, it could be an email notification service or whatever, we can just call it iNotification service, and we have an interface created for us there. We want to actually call this in the twit service, so again we will add it to the constructor, private read-only iNotification service. That we'll have to update, because we're doing the poor man's dependency injection, we're going to have to update our constructor here, new hub notification service. Now we have our notification service passed through to our twit service. After we've saved our data, we also want to notify every connected client about it. So we can call notification service notify new twit. At this point, you've probably noticed this stuff, this async and await stuff. This signifies that this is a synchronous method, and ideally you should be able to run as many of these concurrently as possible. So these two methods, if each of them took 100 milliseconds, to call this method would take a total of 200 milliseconds. But you can optimize this by creating a couple of tasks. So if you change that to a save task, change this to a notify task, you can run both of them at once, which would halve the execution time of this method. If you're relying on lots of external web service calls, you're probably going to want to run as many of these in parallel as possible. So we've created two tasks and run them together. End result is the same. Technically, there's probably a bit of a race condition here where a client could be notified of a new twit before it's been saved to the database, but we'll forget about that for now. Now, in theory, if we run the app, we can fire up another browser. Let's try Chrome this time. Stick that in there. Do the tools, developer tools. No, where's it gone? Tools, developer tools. We can see the console. Let's bring this guy over here. Create a twit. In theory, we should see console logged here. So this browser has been notified that a twit has been created, which is cool. Now we just need to load the twit and display it at the top of the list. To do that, let's extract the UI for the twit into a partial view, which means we can use it elsewhere. So we want to take this snippet of HTML and make it reusable. To do that, let's create a partial view, new view, create a partial view, twits, not twit, and we'll say that the model of this view is a twit, funnily enough. Paste in our code, and we need to update this to refer to the model that has been passed through to this partial. And then back on this list, we can use a link to that partial. This just means that for every twit in twits, we've rendered this partial with that twit, and that's that twit. So that's nice. We need to allow the browser to retrieve a single twit at a time. So again, let's head to the twit service, and we'll add one more method, which is called get single twit in there. And again, we'll pull this up to the interface so we can reuse it elsewhere. This just, from the ID, finds the twit by the ID and returns it. In the home controller, we need to create a partial view, which will be loaded in the background via Ajax. And a partial view just returns a snippet of HTML rather than the entire page. This takes a GUID ID, gets a single twit from the twit service with the partial, which is exactly what we want. In our column, to refer to this in JavaScript, we obviously need to add an ID. And then final step, in index.js, when we've received the notification of the twit, we can do an Ajax call, which calls the twit partial view and adds the resulted HTML to the top of this div. If we were writing a single page application entirely in JavaScript for the front end, data here would probably actually be just a JSON representation of the twit itself, and you can directly insert that into whatever front end templating system you're using. So this should be it. If we can reload that, Chrome. Come on. Right, so moment of truth. On the right, it should appear. Testing, testing. There you go. It's magically loaded up on the right. And we can go, OK, twit. And we've done it. That's the code. Final step is that we want to put this in the cloud somewhere so we can actually let people use it. To do that, we're going to use Windows Azure. We can create, directly from Visual Studio, we can create a site. Let's call this Medi Twit. The location hosted will be in Ireland, West Europe. It will allow us to create a new database straight away. Create. This will take a bit of time. Has anybody used Azure before? Yeah? A little bit. It's pretty cool now. It's all integrated into Visual Studio, so you don't even need to head to the website. So we can click OK, and you'll see that it's set up all of our published settings for us. It will even update our database connection string, which is really nice of it. And all we have to do is hit publish, and we can see sort of some web deploy magic happening here, where it's deploying to the server. Let's load it up. And we see meditwit.azurewebsites.net. Come on, compile, come on. There you go, and we're in business. You can click login, Google. Oh, Japanese, that's nice. Register, and we're in business, so we can go test. And now, to get an extra slice of pizza, who wants to be the first person to try and log in and add a twit from their machines? Got a laptop, got a tablet. It should be live, and we should be able to see it here. The address is meditwit.azurewebsites.net. It's a race. Who's going to win? Who's going to win? Oh! Spiros, well done, mate. I want to get an extra slice. Who's second? You have half a slice if you're second. Oh, Jonathan Price. Second slice for you. Right, that's me done. Did we get in under an hour? It's 8 o'clock. Hey, perfect. Right. Thank you, everyone. If you have any questions or anything, grab me over pizzas, and I can talk about any of the stuff that we used tonight. What we did was build just a vertical slice of the .NET web stack using a little bit of everything to create one single piece of functionality. So hopefully you've enjoyed it, and you've seen my email address enough times, so you can send me an email if you need it. Thanks everyone, cheers.